Hey, welcome back to the most innovative shipping container channel on YouTube. And I figured today I'd do something a little bit different. We do a lot of shipping container content, obviously, how to do this or that, DIY projects or projects that we're working on. But I thought it'd be interesting to share kind of how I got started and the story all the way from how I was raised to how I got into entrepreneurship and everything in between, and the hope that maybe this could help someone else who's a budding young entrepreneur or someone who's running a business who is still trying to figure things out. And I haven't figured out everything, but I've run a few successful businesses, so I think I've got some good information to share. And what I see on social media is kind of like these guys who've got private jets and Ferraris. They've got a coaching business or something, and it just none of it seems practical for the average person. And I think my upbringing to now is a pretty average American story or even an immigrant story. And my grandparents were all immigrants to America. And one of my grandparents was very entrepreneurial, but all of them came here, seeking the American dream. And so I don't know where I got it from, but as we go through kind of where I was born and how I was raised and some things that happened along the way, maybe that'll shed some light on some of that. So I wanted to share that story and maybe, like I said, give some hope to other people or some information on how you might navigate certain situations and kind of how I've come about owning different businesses and the strategies that I've used. And there are a lot of things I've learned along the way, mistakes made, and also good decisions. So I want to share those. And like I said, I think this is all very practical information. So it'll be a longer form video. It might end up being several parts, but so sit down with us and I'll go through everything and like and comment if you have questions. And so thanks for watching. So beginning all the way back to where I was born in Wichita, Kansas, which for whatever reason is a very entrepreneurial town. It seems like because we don't have a lot of natural resources here, whether that be mountains or lakes or beaches. Um, it's like this, I don't know if it's a boredom, um, or if it's in the culture from all the aircraft starting here, industry, but it's a very entrepreneurial town. So it seems like no matter what business you start, there are multiple people doing it or copying it. But it's like if you run a business here, and a lot of corporate businesses that started here go on to say this, whether that's Pizza Hut or Freddy's, Coke Industries, Cessna Aircraft, Beach Aircraft. If you can compete in Wichita or run a restaurant here, you can kind of do it anywhere because it's so competitive. And like the failure rate for restaurants is like 80%. It's probably even higher for Wichita. But I've been a lot of places, and Wichita has some of the best restaurants and food. One that comes to mind is like Kobe Steakhouse. It's hibachi Japanese cooking. I've been a lot of places, and Kobe's is the best world class hibachi cooking in the world. I'd put it up against anywhere. So, born in Wichita, and I think if you're going to be an entrepreneur, I think that kind of there are a lot of pieces to it. I think there are some people that are born into the family business, and I'll get into that more. I think there are some people who show a propensity toward selling things or being entrepreneurial from a young age, or it's a combination of everything. So I was born in Wichita, very blue collar, middle income upbringing. Uh, Mother stayed at home. Generally, she did work some part time jobs. Both my parents are basically disabled, but they didn't want to accept government assistance in any way. So my mom stayed home while we were younger, and my dad always had what we would consider a good blue collar, middle income job. But with three kids in the family, we obviously, in the 80s and 90s, it was sort of different with how far the dollar would go. But we didn't have any extra, but we didn't need anything else. Uh, So very, I would say average upbringing, maybe a little bit lower than average as far as income. So I started uh, preschool at the local school, just like any other kid. Had a few speech issues, kind of worked through those, and as I went into kindergarten, I really got into drawing and being in this. I wouldn't say lower income neighborhood. Now it is. Back then, it was a lower middle income. I would say some of the families in the elementary school, not most, but a lot, were single parent home situations, and that kind of permeates through my middle school and high school as well. Um, so you're around some, I would say, kids are going to drop out statistically. A lot did. A lot of fights. So where I went, Dodge Elementary, and that's where I started kindergarten. It was pretty rough. And we'll get into middle school and high school and how that kind of shaped everything. But beginning in kindergarten, I showed a propensity to draw. I really enjoyed drawing, and through first and second grade, really started to excel in numbers and math. And so in second grade, I didn't really know what was going on. I was too young to kind of realize what was going on. The I was called in with a bunch of teachers and the principal and my parents, and I sort of felt like I was in trouble. They said, basically, here's a bunch of tests. And next thing I knew, I was pushed into Emerson Magnet, into the gifted program there. And so I guess looking back, what they were doing was, IQ tests and all these sort of tests they give you. And so I skipped the line, went into Emerson Magnet School, and I got out of the bad school. Emerson was much better school, and so I went there for third, fourth, and fifth grade. And Emerson was a great school. You kind of learned on your own time. You had a weekly uh, agenda that of the work you needed to get done, and you could buzz through it as fast as you want, take it home, do homework. And so I would usually buzz through that and spend my additional time drawing. Um, so enter sixth grade, we went to Hadley Middle School, and this was back to the lower middle income, a little bit rougher neighborhood sort of school. And so sixth grade, I started to see a lot of fights, a lot of vandalism, theft. Um, I was in the advanced classes. We kind of had our own portables outside, and so I wasn't around as much of the trouble. But we're still on the playground. I see kids playing chicken on the goalpost, kicking each other, bloody kids. So it was pretty crazy. And I don't know if I shared any of this with my parents or everybody just thought it was normal. Looking back, it seems pretty abnormal now, especially given my kids go to a suburban school. If I heard of any of this happening, I think we'd all be in shock. So I don't know if it was the time, if this stuff still goes on, uh, but it was pretty traumatizing. I did get good grades. I did run around with some kids who weren't the best. Uh, and remembering who they were and what I was doing, thinking back, most of them were single parent homes. I did have both parents, so maybe that was an advantage that I had. So sixth, seventh, eighth grade is Hadley. It's pretty rough. I'd see a fight. I'd say on a weekly or bi-weekly basis there was some sort of fight or altercation. People running out of school, uh, people getting punched over basketballs. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And I'm still buddies with a few guys who went there, and we tell stories. We laugh about it. Some of the stories we could tell, no one would even believe it. So I don't really get into most of it. So after Hadley, I stayed in the advanced programs and gifted whatever. Went on to North High, which is a very historical school in Wichita. Um, I guess there was a way to stay out of the rough crowds, and I didn't really hang with a really rough crowd, but it's kind of unavoidable. And I equate high school and middle school to some extent to being like jail. You're going to get basically punked or tested to the point you're going to have to stand up for yourself and probably fight somebody, or they're going to keep messing with you and you're just going to be a punk. So that's kind of how things went. Um, but back in middle school, I started bringing candy and gum to school. And my motivation was to basically make some money to get parts for my bike, um, bicycle parts. I had a Schwinn Predator, and I wanted to get pegs and these nice pedals and chain and spruce the bike up and a gyro for the front wheel for the front handlebar so you could spin that around. And so I started going to Sam's Club, and no one told me to do this. I don't know where it came from. My mom had a Sam's membership and we would go there. And I remember seeing buckets of gum, and my brains just started instantly going, well, there's so many pieces of gum in that tub. I think they came out to 4 or 5 cents a piece. And I knew I could sell them for 15 or 20 cents a piece. Those are regular bubble gum. So we buy a 5 pound tub of this kind of disgusting bubble gum. It's probably still around. The other big profit makers, after I was kind of doing the math, and I knew what they sold in the vending machine for, was the 10 packs of Big Red, 10 packs of Juicy Fruit, and then you had the packs of Bubblicious. I think the Bubblicious were um, a 5 pack, 6 pack, but I could basically double or more my money on each purchase and still be under the cost of the vending machine. So my backpack and locker became absolutely stuffed, and this was all around sixth, seventh grade, with gum and candy. And so anything I would compare, some items that wouldn't work, but I would look what's in the vending machine, see what the kids were always buying, what was running out, go to Sam's Club, buy the gum or candy that had the best margins, that would sell the best, and I would stock all that stuff, and I was basically just selling that stuff every day. And I would take all that money and spend it on my Schwinn Predator or whatever other bike I had, and buy comic books and Legos. So all of this was just kind of organic. I don't know, the driver was to make money, but the driver wasn't to uh, get rich. It was, I enjoyed selling the stuff. I enjoyed undercutting the vending machine because I felt like I was doing a service to the customer by being cheaper. So to me, it was a market. I knew nothing about business, but I felt like I was doing a favor to the customer. So we're there to serve the customer. If we can give them a better deal, we're going to do that. And so all of this kind of began in sixth, seventh grade with the entrepreneurship. Um, so going into high school, the gum and the candy kind of continues. In high school, I did get into a youth entrepreneurs program, and so we had some classes on how to invest in stocks, how to save money, how to write a business plan, and I sort of got into that, and I enjoyed the class, but it didn't really pique my interest like just engaging in business did. It was like the book work behind formally running a business was sort of boring. I really wasn't interested in it. And I like numbers, and I really like math, and I like memorizing stuff. I just memorize numbers. I don't know why, and that's always served me well in business. But I had no interest in really writing down business plans. It's just like I would have a strategy in my head and I would execute, and it was always instinctually based. And you'll hear that a lot from entrepreneurs is like this, you've got this instinct, how to do things. And it's really no one else is going to tell you anything. You might get ideas and suggestions, but most of the time you've kind of slept on this or lost sleep over it, thought about it all day and night for weeks and months and years. And there's not much else anyone can tell you. You can get advice here and there. And obviously selling gum and candy on the smaller scale is just a small scale business that you wouldn't get advice on, but this turned into other items that I could use. My dad had a little machine shop at home, and I would make like little rubber band uh, dart shooters, anything, like the young boys would want to, like rubber band guns. There are a lot of those things I could make in my dad's shop, and I would sell those as well. Um, but it was all these ideas of just how to make a few bucks here and there. So the driver behind it was sort of twofold. It was like helping the customer, helping your friends, serving your friends, and you're making money at the same time. So it's like win-win. But it's not like I wanted to go flash the money. Yeah, I did want to put some stuff on my bike, but this is kind of transferred over into adulthood with the the money. I don't think most entrepreneurs are driven by that they want to go buy a yacht. I think their main passion or love in life is just running the business and being competitive and helping the customer. And the money is just a product. And the second the challenge is over, or the challenge of growing the business is over, we're on to the next thing. And so the selling the gum and the candy and other items, it turned into subwoofers and speakers and putting amps in people's cars and stereos. That all continued through high school. And so the next phase will be getting into high school and then college, and we will get into that now with part two. Okay, part two. So this is going to be high school, college, kind of deciding what to do. A little bit more on what went on in high school and things like that. So high school, like I said, it was pretty rough. You might be drinking out of the water fountain and get your head pushed down in the water fountain and get a bloody lip. You're either going to walk off or you're going to confront that person. And so how this ties into entrepreneurship is adversity. So I always think of the guys who did the bombing runs or went to Vietnam or the bombing runs over Europe during World War II. Like if you ask them if that made them a better person, yes. The adversity, as long as you didn't die, you're not going to die in high school, but as long as you didn't die doing these things, it was a crazy life experience, made you a better person, shaped who you are. But do you want your kids going through it? Probably not. So it's like it probably made me a really good entrepreneur. All the adversity I faced through middle school and high school. But I don't think you need to go through that to be a good entrepreneur. But maybe it helped me to some degree. So the takeaway from that is no matter what you have happening to you or your circumstances, it's how it's supposed to be, and you make the best of it. And the adversity shapes you, in my opinion. If you get through more difficult things, it's going to make you a stronger, better person. End of the sentence. End of story. So in high school, and this is 20 years ago plus, there's always a big push for college. And it's my strong opinion at 16, 17, 18 years old, you have no idea what you want to do. At that time, I would have said architect or marine biologist. And thank God I didn't do either one of those, because I wouldn't be where I am. And so everything happened for a reason. So this big push for knowing what you want to do right out of high school into college, I don't believe in any of it. There's some kids who know from 6 years old they want to be a doctor. I guess I knew from 7 years old I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But in high school, all they did was push us to college, and that was not the right path for me, especially at that time. I don't know what the fix is for that, but that's a big problem. Especially with technology now, there's a lot of things you can learn. You can learn to be an entrepreneur just by running a business, or from a family member who's running a business. You can go to college. It may help you with entrepreneurship, and I'll get into that because I did end up going to college. I just don't buy into this idea that we need to go to college right out of high school to pick a career. Your brain's not developed. You have no idea what you want to do. From age 18 to 25, I changed radically, and I think most people do. And from age 25 to 30, I changed that much again. So luckily, I found a way and a path to do what I wanted to do. But this push to get people into a career out of college is not the way this should be addressed. So I graduate high school with a very good GPA. I think almost 4.0. Just kind of got into some trouble, and we were out being hoodlums half the time, typical teenage boys. But I always got good grades, because if I didn't, I was going to get my butt kicked at home. So luckily, I had two parents at home. As soon as I left high school, I think I waited tables for a while. Had a couple of just odd jobs. I did enroll at Wichita State for a semester. I think I had 12 hours, which was a full schedule. I finished those classes, finished that semester, dropped out, and they say once you drop out, you're not going to go back, and statistically, that's pretty true. But it just wasn't the right time for me to go to college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so those were just general studies classes that ended up going toward my degree later. Um, so I wouldn't say it was a waste of time. I just had no idea what I wanted to do. So I'm working a few odd jobs. At this point, I just need enough money to pay rent. And so these jobs, they're all pretty terrible. I guess each one taught me a lot of skills. You know, waiting tables teaches you a tremendous amount of dealing with people and talking and hustling for money. So I highly recommend waiting tables or being a host or hostess at a restaurant. It teaches you a ton of life skills. Um, so that went on for about a year, just doing a lot of partying, not really being productive at all. Um, and then I got an opportunity to get on at Cessna Aircraft, which was a very good move. And this is kind of where everything starts to take a turn for me. Um, I would say at any given point, I had $20 to my name. You know, I could always go bum 20 bucks off my parents if I needed gas money, but that's all I had. I had a vehicle and 20 bucks, 40 bucks. Sometimes I had 100 bucks if I was lucky. So we just kind of partied and hung out, and I always kind of had a job and was doing something, but that's about it. And I did take the SATs after high school, and so at this point, I had a semester of college down, and but at this point, with no money and really no path, and you know, just kind of hanging out with friends, entrepreneurship has kind of taken a back seat. I mean, how are you going to start a business without an idea or 50 bucks or anything? So I guess maybe I would have started down the entrepreneurial path sooner had I had resources. But then again, things happen the way they're supposed to happen. So um, I got the job at Cessna Aircraft, which around here, the aircraft jobs are known for paying very well. So I got on there, and they've got really good benefits, and they pay for college. If you want to be a pilot, they've got a flying club there, and they'll reimburse you for some of the flying time. So I got a job at Cessna, and I started on second shift, which is 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And it's a good shift for a younger person, I would say that. So you wake up late, you know, noon, 11 a.m., whatever, go to work, and so I get the first 90 days is actually on first shift, and so after 90 days of training, I went to second shift, and so I'm like 19, maybe 20 at this time, and I walk into second shift, and so hey man, I got the job at Cessna, I'm happy, everything's great. Um, you know, pays well, got insurance, I can buy some stuff, you know, see the guys that are work their way up on seniority, they've got nice trucks, nice houses, all this stuff, you can work overtime. And I walk into second shift, and it's like I looked at everybody, and I looked at the guys who've been there 30 years, and I don't know, a light went off, and I was like, I got to get out of here. So that was the inflection point for me. It was for me at that moment, I could have worked a career up there, even into a salaried job, which eventually happened, and just stay there for the rest of my life, bounce around corporate, whatever. But it was at that point I knew I wasn't going to get stuck on the floor there at Cessna. And nothing against what my dad had done, but he had spent, you know, 45 years at Cessna. It's a good life and everything. I just knew it wasn't for me. So I walk into second shift, I look around, and I have a panic attack. So I enroll in college immediately. Cessna reimbursed for college. So if you're looking at going to school, go get a job somewhere that reimburses your college, or work a job and pay for it as you go. And I know it's gotten more expensive, so I'm not even an advocate for college in most cases, but this was my path. So I enroll back in college, and a few years goes by. September 11th happens. It took a couple years for that to hit the aviation market, but I got laid off in 2003. I stayed in college full time. I graduated college in 05. Still didn't have an idea of what I was going to do, but I was doing a lot better and I was being productive. So I finished college in 04 or 05, graduated with a good GPA. I ended up majoring in business administration, and it was about a month or two before I graduated, I had gone on a party bus. So the lights went off for me. Hey, I know about stereos and lights and a little bit about interiors. I was doing aircraft interior Cessna, and so I decided to buy a bus on eBay. I funded that with some money I had saved up from working at Cessna, cashed out my 401k. I got called back to Cessna in like '05, so I had income coming in again. And I bought a bus, graduated college, bought a second bus, and that business, I won't go into a ton of detail, but your first business and your first cash flow, it seems impossible. Luckily at this time, I wasn't supporting a large family, but when you start a business, you literally take every penny you've got, every penny you're making, every penny the business earns, you just dump it back into the business. And so the businesses I love are where you are taking minimal risk. So for me, buying a bus that's worth a set amount of money, operating that bus, if everything goes south, I still have the buses and I can sell them. So the bus business actually took off. The Before I knew it, I had 5 buses. I put my 2 weeks in at Cessna. By this time, I had worked into a salary job at Cessna. It was a very good job. Then the '08 recession hit, and the party bus business actually did very well during the recession, along with the bars. And so by this time, I had 6, 7 buses. We had some pretty stiff competition in Wichita with other party bus companies. But that stage from starting that business to cash flowing and making enough to live, making investments, is the most difficult part of your business life, I would say. I've hit one other really rough patch, but that first patch, I did borrow some money from a friend at Cessna. It was a high interest loan, and so I paid him back with like 18% interest in 1 year, and that was like a $15,000 or $20,000 loan. I had another 15 or 20,000 between my 401k and what I'd saved up at work, and then the cash flow. So everything the buses made every weekend, I just dumped that back into building more buses, making sure all the debt's paid off, buying a warehouse, and investing in the business. So this entire time, I drove a Toyota Prius. It was like a $6,000 or $7,000 car. I uh, pay everything with cash. The only debt I would take out was for the business. And so when you start that business, you have to be able to sacrifice everything. But what was clear to me from the beginning is if you're going to be serious about business, you have to leave your job. There's no working a full-time job and running a side business, a serious side business. There might be some mailbox money or some gigs out there where you can work and run a sort of have a side income. But if you're going to be a business owner, entrepreneur, and you're going to be serious about it, you have to be ready to quit your job. That's one of the main obstacles I see to people being successful with business is they start something or they talk about starting something and they never leave the security of their job. So you have to be willing to leave the security of your job, and that's going to free up your time, and it's going to push you to be more competitive and basically make it. That security blanket of the job is nice, but you're trying to compete against people who aren't working. So at this time, this is like 2008 or 9. The bus business is going very well. We've got our debt paid off, and that's, like I said, that's really the impossible part of starting to be a full-time entrepreneur is that first business, that first cash flow. The things I would not do is go sign a lease at a strip mall for where you want to put a business before you've ever had cash flow. You want to keep all your investments to an absolute minimum before you have opened your doors. You have no idea if the business is going to take off, what it's going to do. So you need to cash flow first. You take that cash flow and then you put it back into the business. So part 3, we're going to get into where the party bus business went, the transportation business, the other businesses I got into, and then how that all segued into shipping containers. Okay, part 3. So back to the beginning of the party bus business, I approached several friends, and this goes back to everything happens for a reason. I approached several friends. Hey, I've got this idea, or do these party buses, blah, blah, blah. and no one either had money, they had no interest in doing it. A year or two later, the second the business took off, they all wanted to be a part of it. Looking back on my career, do not do business with friends. Do not enter into partnerships. Uh, Thankfully, none of that transpired when I started out. So no one will help you when you begin. I don't think you want any help when you begin. I think you want to do it all by yourself. If you go get some cheap money, interest rates go up and down. The banks generally won't help you when you're starting out because you have no track record. So generally, it's going to be all on you to start, unfortunately. And for me, that was a good thing. Had I gone to the SBA or gone to a buddy or had a friend or a partner, I'd have a partner. We're going to have these disagreements. And I've had some quasi partnerships through the years. None of them work out. You just end up losing friends. So do not do partnerships. Do not do anything with friends and family ever under any circumstances. And if you go to the SBA when you have an idea in its infancy, you're just starting a new business and they give you $100, $200, $300,000, you go spend it, it doesn't work out, you're in debt, you got to pay it back. It's like a student loan. I don't think you can claim bankruptcy on it. So I don't even think it's a good idea to take out a bunch of money or debt when you're starting a business. Now, as you progress along and the banks will loan you money and you've got assets and you can prove cash flow and revenues and all that, that makes sense. But no one is going to help you generally, and I don't think you should ask for help from anybody when you start a business. So that's my opinion. That's how I did it. And looking back, that's exactly the way it should have happened. It forced me to be more conservative, make decisions that I should have made. They're all the right decisions. So if you can't do exactly the business that you want to do without some massive amount of funding, choose a different business. On that topic, you hear this a lot. It's cliche. You need to pick something you're passionate about. Okay, well, you need to pick something that you're passionate enough about or that you can be passionate about. Unfortunately, all the things that are men and women are generally passionate about are crowded, competitive, and they don't make money. So a lot of men like to work on cars, soup cars up. Unfortunately, too many people like doing it too much. There's no money in it. So there are a few custom shops that make money fixing cars. Generally, most of them fail. There's too many people that enjoy doing it too much, and that's sort of a boutique. On the other side of that, too many people enjoy, so stay away from things that people enjoy doing. Boutiques, fixing up cars, things like that. And the business that you can pick with the more barriers to entry, the better. So, lawn care is the first one that comes to my mind. There's a ton of lawn care companies, a ton of them make a bunch of money. There are no barriers to entry. You go buy a mower, get a truck, you're in business. So you're always going to have a ton of competition, and maybe it's a good business to start out with, cut your teeth on, but you're always going to have a ton of competition. So the easier it is to get into the business and compete with you, you will have a ton of competition. And if you have a new idea and there's not big barriers to entry, you're going to have a ton of competition. With the transportation company I had, the buses and getting insurance and the risk involved were pretty substantial barriers to entry. And once I got scaled up to a point with 6, 7, 8 buses, it was hard for anyone else to compete with me. Behind the scenes of all that are your website, Google reviews, taking care of the customer. I mean, do not get a bad review under any circumstances. If you have to lose money on a customer to save getting a bad review, you got to do it. So, 08, 09, the buses are going well. We've got the recession. A lot of my friends that I worked with at Cessna did get laid off in 08 and 09. They thought I was crazy when I left to go do the party buses. So it just goes to show you never know. I left a good job and it worked out. So, like I said, people will not help you when you need the help, and everyone will try to help you when you don't need the help. So just remember that. So, as you're running the business, I'm going to go back to the buses. Let's fast forward a few years. I had bought a warehouse and sort of invested in real estate, and that was a good write-off and depreciation for the business as we went along. I always stayed very conservative. The first commercial property I bought, It was a big investment for me at the time. I had to put a 20% down. I had saved all that money from being very conservative that entire time. I never had a fancy house, never had a fancy car. Unless you just hit the jackpot with something on the internet. And that goes back to I trying to be practical with this. I think a lot of the things we see on social media are guys who say they're making 10 or 11 figures or whatever it is, and they've got these big houses and yachts and whatever. The statistics, something like 96% of small businesses never gross over $1 million, believe it or not. And the bottom of the 1% top 1% income earners in the U.S. make $440,000 a year. So we're talking about an extremely small group of people. I'm trying to gear this toward the average person, the average entrepreneur. The never let off the gas. So never start buying fancy stuff if you think you've got money. Never this is like a common thread with a lot of really good entrepreneurs is like you'll see Warren Buffett, he still lives in a $150,000 house and still drives a 98 Cadillac. Obviously that's taken to the extreme, but we never feel comfortable. We never feel like we've made it. You always feel hungry. You always feel broke. And that's how you should always feel. It's not like you can't enjoy nice things, but you should always feel that someone's right behind you. The competition's coming. You should always feel broke. You should always feel the pressure. Never let off the gas on the business. There are ebbs and flows in entrepreneurship. Sometimes you're doing a lot. You're dealing with a lot of stress. You're hiring people. Sometimes everything is running smooth and you're not doing much. The next minute, everything goes to crap and you're doing a lot again, and it's very stressful and you're not sleeping at night. There are ebbs and flows, but you never let off the gas. The second you let off the gas, someone else is going to come along and take your stuff. So years go by. 2020 hits. I'm running the party bus company. Between that time, I had started a freight company. We were using smaller trucks hauling various oil field parts and a couple of things for local manufacturers. I never really enjoyed the actual trucking business. You're dealing with a lot of regulations from the DOT a lot. It's pretty stressful, a lot of truck breakdowns, and that on top of the buses, it was just too much. So we really scaled back the trucks and got into the brokering side of freight. But come 2020 and with COVID, all of the buses got shut down. So our local county basically shut down everything except for your larger businesses like Lowe's and Walmart and then some of the liquor stores. So the buses had no income. Luckily at this time, I was in my late 30s, 40. I had money saved up. I was okay. I was going to be okay. We were building a warehouse. We had bought some new property. I had sold the first warehouse I bought. Financially, I was okay, but that light went off again, and it was one of these ebbs and flows I talk about in business where, it's kind of time to think about something else. So that's when I needed a shipping container in the process of moving from one place to another. And I noticed it was just a bunch of scammers online with the selling shipping containers. And I just want to buy a shipping container and not get scammed. And it was a hard thing to do. So I got my first shipping container, got out here to my new property, and I have a lot of website and Google and social media skills from running the party bus company and the other businesses. I used those, started selling the containers, and everything just took off from there. And COVID really pushed that. So again, it's like everything happens for a reason. The adversity of COVID led me into something else. I don't forgive the people who shut us all down, but it drove me on to do something else, and so here we are. I've been doing the containers almost 4 years now, and we started with just selling them online and then locally, and then we started with renting containers, and then we have a lot of customers who say, hey, I need a door or window put in that container. We started doing the modifications. With the modifications came a lot of full-time employees that I've not dealt with on this scale before. and where my skill set is in strategy, kind of knowing where to take the business, how to do this. My my skill set has not ever really been with managing people, especially in the shop environment. So as an entrepreneur, you either figure these things out or you're not going to grow. And that was an inflection point for us with the containers was if we're not going to do the modifications, I can sit here and sell and lease containers, and that's it. Maybe we can grow that idea in other markets, but we'd definitely be missing a huge opportunity with the modifications here locally. So I made a decision to start hiring people. That was another big risk. When you've got a lot of payroll, the payroll goes out every week. It doesn't matter if you're waiting to get paid from customers. If things aren't going right, um, being responsible for all the employees is it's a tremendous stress and responsibility because a lot of them have families as well. So I don't hire employees lightly. I take all that very seriously. I don't ever want to lay any of these guys off. And so we've got a bunch of full-time employees now. Things are going well, but you never let your foot off the gas. And so to this day now, we're looking at expanding the warehouse now. Um, so COVID got us into the container business. I ended up selling the party bus business a couple of years ago uh, through a contact. He had a branch of the party bus company in another market, so he was the perfect buyer. Um, for me, I couldn't scale that any bigger. I've got a family. I didn't want to be out of town every weekend trying to grow that business in another market. The container business was easier to scale for me without traveling a lot. If you're going to open up a transportation company in another market, you really need to be there all the time. And so that was a path I just wasn't going to do with the party bus business. And I had done it 16, 17 years. So it had run its course with me. I was ready to move on and do something new. So where the, I wouldn't say this is a mistake, but where I would do things differently is I would have sold that business sooner. Um, I think that I wasted some good years of my life with that business, but again, maybe that's the way things were supposed to be. And had I sold it sooner, I wouldn't have got into the shipping containers. So maybe that's the way it was supposed to work out. Um, I wanted to touch on debt. I mentioned when you're starting out, do not take out a bunch of debt on an idea. If you've proven the idea and it cash flows, sure, take out some debt, but interest rates are up right now. So if money gets cheaper, sure, you can take out some debt. Just be very careful. It can sink you quickly. I see a lot of real estate people who have been taking out a lot of debt and leverage over the past 5 or 10 years. Those those home values can come down in a hurry, and when you're leveraged, you can lose everything in a heartbeat. So be very careful with that. Um, Building a team is what I'm learning about now with the shipping container business. It's very challenging dealing with all the different personalities. I think a lot of entrepreneurs want to get to the point where you've got an HR department and full-time management. Um, but this is also one of the processes that I want to learn. Um, just because I like to learn every facet of the business that I'm in so that I can speak to the employees and be knowledgeable. They respect you. Every modification we can do on a container, I've done myself. I learned how to weld. Um, I was out here doing all that stuff myself. So I think your employees respect you much more when you've done everything yourself. Um, there are no excuses, no matter what happens. If the business fails, whether that's COVID that shuts you down, it's your responsibility. The party buses went on to do very well. Um, had I started that business 1 year prior and had some debt and COVID hit, I don't know how that would have played out. I could have gone out of business, but you've got to be prepared for anything to happen at any time. If the business fails, it's your responsibility. It's up to you. Um, and so that you've got to take responsibility for everything. Um, the best thing about being an entrepreneur is your freedom. The freedom is the most important thing to me. I I will gladly work 60 hours a week to not have to clock in at a job. And that's another sort of common thread with entrepreneurs is that's kind of sort of how we all feel. We probably work more than the average job. But we'd rather have our freedom. Hey, I can take this day off tomorrow, even though you can never really take days off or sleep. So I will get more in depth as far as how to start a business like from the ground up in another video. But I just want to sort of tell my story from the beginning to now, how I got here. Like I said, I think it's a very just sort of average American story. I'm not going to sit here and say I faced a lot of adversity, but I'm one of the very few people I know in the local area that had no assistance from anybody, family wise, wasn't handed a business. I see a lot of family businesses. You know, the son runs it. They've grown it. They've done a great job. But that just wasn't the case with me. And I don't know. Had my father had a business and I got into it, maybe I wouldn't be an entrepreneur. Maybe I would have just run things in the ground. They say the first generation builds it. The second one, the first generation builds it. The second generation enjoys it, and the third generation destroys it. So hopefully that doesn't happen here. But I do what I like. So like I said, drop comments if you have questions or anything, and I'll do a more in-depth video on how to actually start a business and things to do and not to do from the ground up. Thanks for watching.